Today we're going to be talking about football analytics, somber discussion of the nature of statistical usage in football. Somber because people in football don't seem to understand statistics very well. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is kind of the beginning. So back in about like 2007 or 2008, I was really into football in a way that only somebody with an obsessive mathy type personality could get into football. And I was just like, God, there's just I'm seeing it happening in baseball where they've got the sabermetrics going on. And can everybody hear okay with the things? Okay. They've got the sabermetrics going on, and they're really digging deep into baseball. I was like, there's got to be something with football, and I couldn't find anything. But then I found this site, advancednflstats.com, which was founded by this guy named Brian Burke, who wanted to prove to his coworkers that quarterback was an overrated position, and you didn't really like basically if you had like a good offensive line, good wide receivers, you could plug in any old quarterback and you'd still do a good job. And that's why Peyton Manning had such big numbers, was because he had a good team around him. And he was completely wrong. Quarterback is ridiculously important. But it made him do all this analysis that gave us some other surprising conclusions. So okay, next slide. Okay, so let's just look at some common NFL statistics that are commonly looked at today and why they're just total garbage. Okay, so total yards, for example. Total yards is a huge statistic in football. That like if you want to talk about what are the best offenses in football, the Colts, they led the league in total yards, and that's why they have the best offense. But no, that just doesn't make any sense. Like why? Like total yards is just this. It's such a bogus statistic in so many ways. For one thing, not all yards are created equal, right? If you gain 3 yards on 3rd and 2, that's way more valuable than if you gain 3 yards on 3rd and 4, right? And I mean that's like a really obvious example. But there are other much stronger examples, or I mean actually the opposite way. There are other weaker examples, right? That are just permeate all throughout football. Overly sensitive to starting field position. If you start at the 20-yard line, somehow your team gets a turnover. Your offense could have done a really good job, but they only got 20 yards. So there's just a lot there. Total touchdowns is another one. People are all worried about the touchdown record and stuff, and they talk about the greatest seasons of all time being when Peyton Manning got 50 touchdown passes or whatever. But that's also just total nonsense because you could have a quarterback who does nothing until the team gets to the 1-yard line and then throws a touchdown. And then he would, and if he did that every time, he would be considered an amazing quarterback. So obviously these are not good statistics. Now I thought I would open the floor to if anybody else had any other statistics that they wanted me to tell them why they're nonsense.
3rd down conversion.
Oh my God, that's just 3rd down conversion. I haven't prepared for that one. Let's see. But 3rd down conversion is very bad. I have a specific memory of reading this journalist whose blog I would read. I was really into the Huskies, and he did this whole statistical analysis of the Huskies 2006 season versus the 2007 season, and the Huskies were like almost equal in almost every statistical category they looked at. I mean, it was all nonsense categories, right? And then he said, but 3rd down conversion percentage was higher last year, so maybe that explains the points per game difference, because there was a slight points per game difference, but everything else was equal. Okay, so a couple problems with 3rd down conversion percentage. Number one, it's very sensitive to how long of a 3rd down conversion you have to make, right? Number two, a team could have a pretty bad 3rd down conversion percentage and still be an amazing offense if they just never get to 3rd down, right? And actually that's one thing that it kind of turns out. We're not really going to hit on this in this talk too much, but it actually kind of turns out that what is a lot more important than having 3rd and manageable or 3rd and short is just getting a 1st down on 1st or 2nd down. Like that, those are the really good offenses. Okay, let's thank you. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so Brian Burke, he said, okay, we got it. All these statistics, they're all bogus. Of course, There are two statistics that aren't completely bogus that are kind of kept track of, which is yards per play. Not totally bogus, but even that one, it has issues. Yards are still not equal in that situation. He came up with this idea for a new statistic called expected points added. Okay, so what is expected points added? Basically, the problem with it is, of course, it's a little bit more abstract than your standard, statistics that are kept track of by the NFL. Basically, what it is it's a statistic to give you an idea of how much a team's expected point value, okay, how many points they should expect to get on the next drive, changed from play to play, okay? So it's a model of expected points for a team given down and distance and field position. And it's and when we say expected points, we kind of mean like next points, like whoever scored. Well, let's maybe a little be clear when we go to the next slide. So here's how to construct it. Basically, you take a drive situation, okay? You look at so maybe first and 10 from the 50-yard line. You look at all the times that happened, all the times in the whole NFL over, say, a course of 5 years, that a team had a first and 10 from the 50-yard line. Okay, you do that. You look. Okay, you do it only in the first and third quarter. We'll maybe talk about that in a second, where that situation has occurred. Okay, then so say it happened 10 times. It happened 10 times, for example, and say once you had the team with the ball scored a touchdown. Okay, maybe the next time they scored a field goal. Maybe the next time the other team got a field goal. Okay, so then that counts as -3. And you keep on doing this, and you end up with just like a column of numbers, right, of just the next result, right, the next point total that was scored. And then you sum all those up, and then you divide by the total number that you have, right? You just average them, right? And this gives us somehow an expected point value for every game situation given a yard line and a down and distance. Okay? And it's always from the perspective of the team with the ball, right? We count positive points if the team has the ball, negative points if they don't. So then we end up with, say, for first and down, next slide. We end up with something like this, right? We end up with a bunch of points, right? This is all, so here's what this graph is saying. This is distance to the end zone, so this corresponds to like your own 1-yard line. Right here corresponds to the 50-yard line, and then right here would correspond. This is the red zone area, okay? So basically, and this is first and 10. We're assuming that we have first and 10 at each of these yard lines for this graph. And then so we get all this data, and of course it's very unsmooth. But we gotta smooth it out for a model to make sense, right? It doesn't make sense to have it all over the place. Okay. I spent hours yesterday looking for what darned kind of smoothing he used. I don't know. Okay. So some kind of localized regression or something. But anyway, it looks almost overfit to me. But let's go to the next slide. Okay, so now here's some more graphs. This is, of course, so first and 10 we just do the one line. Second down, right? We have to do several lines, right? One for all the different possible total yardages to go. Okay, so this is just kind of the same idea, right? Our expected points. Note that they're in as we get closer and closer to the end zone. Are the expected number of points, the number of points that we should kind of expect to get next. Gets closer and closer to 7. Okay. All right. Next one, and then this is for third down. Again, same idea. Okay. Let's keep going. Okay. So now that's the expected points. How do we calculate expected points added, right? Because we want to know. We basically, the idea is we want to assign a value to every single play to see how did this play, did it improve the team's chances of scoring points, or did it decrease the team's chances of scoring points? Okay, so it's very simple. We just look at the play. We look at what was the expected points for the drive before the play happened, and what was the expected points after the drive happened, and then we subtract the two, and that's our EPA. Okay. So yeah, it's simple. Okay. Next. Okay, what can EPA tell us? It tells us a lot of really good stuff. It tells us, for example, it gives us like this numerical value of like just exactly, no, well not exactly, but much better than other stats have done of how much is this player really contributing? You know, how much is he really giving to the team, right? So it helps us with individual player contributions in some sense. Of course, you can say Peyton Manning, you know, he had an EPA of 100 in 2014. Does that really mean Peyton Manning himself had an EPA of 2014, or Peyton Manning and his receivers and his offensive line had an EPA of 100? You know, it doesn't completely isolate player performance, individual player performance. Okay, another thing the EPA can tell us, and we'll get into this in a second in a very big way, because this is one of the areas that is most important to me, okay, is when should a team go for it on 4th down, okay? And also we can look at our teams running the ball too much, passing the ball too much. EPA can help us with all of these things. Okay, but here's what EPA can't tell us. EPA, for example, say you've got, there's 3 seconds to go in the game. You've got 2nd and 1 from your opponent's 3-yard line, okay? You're down by 2 points, okay? It makes sense to kick a field goal in this situation, because then you just win. Your field goal is almost automatic. You just win. Expected points would tell us to go for it, right? Expected because it's more points, okay? So maybe it's telling us nonsense. So we need maybe another model, okay? So that brings us to the next slide. Okay, so the other model is WPA, win probability added. WPA is a model that basically is trying to approximate how much win probability did each play add. So it's a model based on down and distance, field position. So basically that's all the same as EPA, right? But then it's also based on score and how much time is left in the game, okay? And also I didn't write this because it's kind of a side thing, but number of timeouts each team has, okay? Next slide. Okay, so how to before, just like with EPA, before we can construct a WPA model, we got to construct a WP model. Okay, it's done in very much the same way as the EPA model, except for now, instead of looking at points, we're looking at who won. Okay, so you look at any situation involving down and distance, field position, score, and time. We look at all the games where this situation has come up. We look at who eventually won. Okay, so now our column of numbers is looking like a bunch of 1s and 0s, right? We look at this situation. Maybe it was 1st and 50 again, and 2 minutes to go, and the team's down by 3 points. And then we look at did they win? Did they lose? Did they get a 1 for winning, a 0 for losing, and you just you end up with a bunch of 1s and 0s, and again you just average them, right? And that's going to give you your some estimate of your percent probability of winning, and then again you smooth it out. And then of course WPA, again same thing, it calculated exactly the same way as EPA. Just you look at the game situation before the play happened, you look at the game situation after the play happened, you see what the difference is, and that gives you a positive or negative number whether it increased or decreased your team's chances of winning. Okay. So yeah, comparing the two, why 2? Well, EPA is good for the early game, right, where score and time are not a huge factor. Okay, why did I write this? This is wrong. Okay, excuse that. It is the opposite of that. That should be over here. Okay, WPA, right? It has this so it's good for studying late game situations. Okay, WPA in that 2nd and 1 from the 3-yard line with 3 seconds to go and down by 2 points. WPA is gonna absolutely tell you should kick the field goal there. No brainer, right? Your chance of winning goes way up when you kick the field goal. And it somehow WPA, when we're looking at individual statistics, WPA somehow has this factor of clutch play, right? This factor of, okay, this player, he did a lot of good stuff for his team, but did he really do it when the game was on the line, or did he just do it, when his team had already, was already up by 14 points, or maybe when his team was down by 14 points and the other team had their 2nd string defense in, okay? So it accounts for clutch play, which makes it sound really good, but in some sense, as statisticians, we kind of look at clutch play as noise, right? We kind of look at that as like luck, you know. Everybody talks about how Tom Brady, you know, he's a clutch playoff quarterback, you know. We're not going to talk about this in this talk, but there have been studies that indicate that Peyton Manning, who is considered, you know, the playoffs choker or whatever, Peyton Manning is actually a better playoff quarterback than Tom Brady, okay? Which is blasphemy, I know, but it's true. So yeah, anyway, continue. So, now let's talk about fourth down. This is probably my favorite application of the WPA and EPA models, okay? So, fourth down, when to go for it. Okay, the first step is choose your model. If score is a big factor, if time is a big factor, you want to choose WPA. If it's just a very generic part of the game, where both, you know, the beginning of the first quarter or the third quarter and the scores are close, then you want to use EPA, because then you're just kind of trying to maximize points. Okay, so generally speaking, on fourth down, we've got three options. Excuse me. We've got the option for a punt. We've got the option for a field goal. Not always. I mean, technically always, but sometimes it's absurd to try and kick a field goal. Okay. And then we have the option to go for it on fourth down. Okay. And then all we have to do, we just calculate the EPA or the WPA for each of those things, whichever one we've chosen, and then we see which one gives us the best thing, right? The best EPA or the best WPA, and that's really all we do. So let's look at an example. Patriots versus Colts. Patriots lead 34-28. They have the ball. It's 4th and 2 from the Patriots' own 28-yard line. There's 2 minutes and 8 seconds to go in the game, and the Colts have 0 timeouts. What should the Patriots do? What should they do? Does anybody have any thoughts about what they should do?
Run the ball and kill the clock. Run down the clock. Field goal.
Anyone else?
2 seconds.
You think they should go for it? You're saying they should go for it? All right. Well, what should the Patriots do? Maybe let's do some calculations. Okay. Historically, teams are successful on 4th and 2 about 60% of the time. Okay, if the Patriots convert, the game is won, because you can burn about 40 seconds per play. Okay, so if they convert a first down, they're going to have first down, second down, third down, to 3 plays basically to completely burn off. 2 minutes has 120 seconds. 120 divided by 40 is 3. Okay, so they're going to be able to run out the clock. Yeah, so they win. Okay, according to the model, our WP model, okay, the Patriots' win probability on a failed conversion is 47%. So this is assuming that the Colts have the ball, the dreaded Colts, Peyton Manning and the Colts. Okay, this was back when Peyton Manning played for the Colts. Okay, before he went to the Broncos. Okay, Peyton Manning is going to have the ball at the 28-yard line, so he's only got 28 yards till he's got to score. Okay, but still, he only gets that touchdown about 53% of the time, that touchdown that he needs to win, because he's got no timeouts. He's got to get a touchdown. He can't get a field goal. So only gets it about 53% of the time. We can now calculate the win probability of going for it, right? This is just an average, right? So it's 0.6. Okay, so it's 60%. It's a weighted average, right? It's 60% times 1. Right, so it's 60% times us converting, right? Because there's a 60% chance that we do converting, so that gets a 1, okay? And then we weight the 0.47 probability by 0.4, right? Because there's a 40% chance that we fail to convert, okay? So we add this up and we get 0.788, okay? Now, according to the WP model, the Patriots' win percentage after a punt is only 0.7. So a punt. A couple things to say about a punt. A punt is, for the purposes of this model, is assumed to be, on average, punts net 37 yards. Okay, so we just tack on 37 yards to 28. So that's 22 plus 15. So they would get the ball at their own 35. The Colts would have the ball at their own 35. So much longer field, right? Much longer field. And so the Patriots still have a pretty good chance to stop Peyton Manning. But clearly, their best chance is to just try and end the game right there, right, and not have to put their defense on the field against the dreaded Peyton Manning, okay, and risk losing, okay. So it's clearly better to go for it, okay. This actually happened, of course, in 2009. I think it was November 15th. This was a really big deal at the time in the sports world. Everybody was like, Bill Belichick, you fool! That was the worst call I've ever seen. And the stats guys were like, wait, no, it was a good call. It was totally fine. It didn't work out, but it was totally fine. Brian Burke, the guy who I talked about earlier, another football analyst, defended him, and they were widely criticized. But kind of an amazing thing happened when they were widely criticized, which was the pundits, you know, these fools that just say exciting things to make you know, just to tell they just tell stories about football, right? They don't ever talk about real numbers or anything. They started trying to come up with their own analyses of the game, of the situation. And anyway, continue. So, for example, Tony Dungy, who was actually a former head coach of the Colts in 2009, he said, you have to punt the ball in that situation. As much as you might respect Peyton Manning, you have to play the percentages and punt the ball. Okay, analytics people pointed out that, okay, playing the percentages, what do you mean, Tony Dungy? The percentages clearly say go for it. Okay, and so the media started paying attention to football analytics, and non-statistics sports writers started using statistics to analyze sports. Bill Simmons, does anybody know who Bill Simmons is? Mr. Sports, or what's his nickname? I don't know. Anyway, Bill Simmons, really big deal in Grantland. He's the founder of Grantland, if anybody knows what that is. He had this incredibly long article where he was like, no, but we should use these numbers instead. Like, he was like trying to say that like you should instead of using the rates for 4th and 2 conversions, you should use the rates for 2-point conversions, but then 2-point conversions only based on a certain subset of really bad teams, because the Patriots, they were playing really badly at that time, which is all fine. With that, like, that's fine, but it's just he restricted the sample size down to like 13, so of course he got what he wanted. Okay, and of course this is bad statistics, as we can all see. It's much better to just use league baselines. Okay, so unfortunately, most of the stats was nonsense. Okay, and I thought maybe at the time, I was 18 years old, very naive. I thought maybe this would lead to some kind of great, 4th down revolution. There would be a national conversation about going for it on 4th down, and we would finally come to the conclusion that teams should go for it more on 4th down. Didn't happen at all. So anyway, next slide. Even people who agreed with Belichick didn't really get it. Like, here's one of my favorite analyses of the play from a guy that said it was a good idea, that he agreed with Belichick, and he's also a guy that said all of statistical analysis is nonsense, which is why it's kind of interesting. So it was 4th and 2, and if we get the ball back, there's a pretty strong likelihood, based on what we have done up to that point, that we're going to have a good chance to win the game. What are you saying, man? You're just instead of saying numbers, you're just saying qualifiers. So anyway, I'm not going to go through the whole quote, but basically he's going through, their most successful play with Tom Brady was a quarterback sneak. How many times has Tom Brady quarterback snuck? Like 5 times, It's such a small sample size. Anyway, he gave the ball to Falk, which was the second most effective guy in short yardage, so it was the right decision from a football standpoint. I mean, again, he's basically dodging numbers, which is, and the reason why I bring this up is to just kind of show the problem that there is, this mismatch of people that just they don't like the numbers. Anyway, okay, next slide. Okay, so here's a handy dandy chart for when to go for it on 4th down. Okay, so basically this is how far you are from the end zone. This is the distance to go, and excuse me. And then this area right here, this is the area where you want to go for it. So basically, if you want to know whether you should go for it, look at, and this is of course for a generic game situation, right? If there's high leverage either way, some kind of score or time pressure, it'll change. But basically, so let's say you're at your own 30-yard line, okay? then, wait, distance, no, sorry, this is the opponent's 30-yard line. So let's say you're at your opponent's 30-yard line, and you've got 4th and 4. You should go for it. Do we see teams going for it on 4th and 4 from the 30-yard line? No. And here's, my favorite examples are over here, okay? Let's say you've got 4th and 2 from your own 20, right? Teams punt 100% of the time in that situation. Well, not 100%, because sometimes in the 4th quarter they're desperate. But in a generic game situation, they punt 100% of the time, all the time. But the numbers say you should go for it there, which is crazy. So I mean, we can clearly see if there was another line for when coaches actually go for it, it would sometimes they get sometimes around between the 40 and the 50 they kind of pucker up and they say, okay, we'll go for it on 4th and 2 from the 50. So it would be like this it would be like this, right? So they're missing out on tons of value, tons and tons of value, right? This is real value. This is a chance for them to seriously increase their probability of winning the game. And they're just saying like, no. So why is this happening? What's going on? What's happening? Next slide. 3 possible answers. Football cannot leave its roots behind. Way back in the day, way back when, if you punted football games were incredibly low scoring. Offenses were just horrible. You ran the ball all the time. You barely ever passed. And if you punted the ball, that basically guaranteed that the team wouldn't score on its next possession. Okay. So that's one possible explanation, is that football just is kind of stuck in the past. Okay. Another explanation is the blame game. Okay. Coaches, maybe they're not trying to maximize their team's chances of winning the game. Maybe what they're trying to maximize is their chances of keeping their own jobs. Okay? Because the first coach that goes and decides he's going to start going for it on 4th down when he should go for it on 4th down, that actually starts to do that, once it goes wrong for him, and it will go wrong, because going for it on 4th down is a high variance proposition, he's going to get fired maybe, or at least more blame put on him. He's going to put more, he's going to get put on the hot seat for that decision. Whereas if he had just punted and he loses the game when he punted, then it's just his team's fault, right? So it's like the coach, if the coach makes this decision, it's like it's his fault, okay? And then also there's this idea of risk aversion, which is kind of a psychological thing. Maybe my sports psychologists here, know more about this than me, but basically that people view negative risk, people view risk differently than they view the outcome. People view bad things as being worse than the corresponding good things, if that makes sense, right? That people are more risk averse than they are reward wanting or whatever, okay? Which made sense in the hunter-gatherer times, but it just doesn't make sense anymore, okay? Okay, next slide. Okay, so now we've really beaten 4th downs pretty good here, but let's talk about running versus passing. Okay, so our team's running the ball too much, passing the ball too much, what's going on? EPA can maybe help us figure out which it is. So here's a graph of the expected point value of a run versus a pass on 1st down. Okay, let's just look here. This is 0. Okay, this is 0 EPA right here. This is running. Okay, so on average, you're actually losing points by running the football on 1st down. It's like a hindrance. It's a bad play to run on 1st down. A huge, on average, usually it's wrong. It's just the result is wrong and the decision is wrong. Passing, we can see is way better, right? Passing, our EPA is like 0.1. So again, this is a huge amount of just raw points being left on the field, right? Let's say a team runs on 1st down 10 times in a game. That is going to be that. So the difference here. Let's see. Maybe I think the average distance is something like 0.1. So if they run the ball 10 times on 1st down in a game, That's the whole point that they just left on the field, on average, right? And you might say, okay, but a point isn't that much. How often does a point decide a whole football game? And the two responses to that. One, it's not always 1 point. Sometimes it's 0 points. Sometimes it's 3 points. Sometimes it's 7 points. It just averages out to 1, right? And the other thing is, football coaches are looking for every last edge, right? I mean, a whole point is huge to them, right? Football coaches go to way bigger extremes to gain a lot less value than 1 point per game. So I mean, this is a huge amount. Okay. Next slide. Okay, let's look at second down. Okay, second down, running versus passing on second down is a little bit, trickier to take into account because on first down, we kind of just have one distance on first down. We have 1st and 10. Okay, so we just have one bucket that we kind of put all in place. And of course, there's holding and there's false starts and stuff. But, 1st and 10 is the vast majority of first downs. Second down, it's a little bit different. So we kind of put the distance into different buckets, as we can see with 13, 12, 11. Okay, so if we have second and 13, 12, and 11, our pass percentage is 72%. Okay, and it turns out that again, even so, our pass EPA is higher than our run EPA. Okay, so passing is somehow better than running on second down and long. Okay. Now, this is my favorite line of this chart. This one, and actually these three combine really to just be my favorite line of the chart because what is going on here? So second and 13, 12, or 11, we're passing a whole bunch. Then we go to below 50% passing on second and 10 for some reason, and then we go back to above for second and 9, 8, and 7. What? That just doesn't make sense because the idea is the longer you have to go, the more likely you are to pass. So why, on second and 10, are we passing less than we are on second and 9, 8, and 7? Does anybody have any ideas for why that might be? Yeah.
Whenever you whenever you are like, oh, the pass didn't work, and then you're like, I better run it instead.
Yeah, exactly. Because what is the most likely play to lead to a second and 10? An incomplete pass, right? That's what leads to a second and 10 most of the time. Of course there are runs that go for no gain, but usually it's a pass. Usually it's an incomplete pass. And so, I mean, but this is insane because this is like an amateur mistake that coaches are making. To be like, oh, the pass didn't work, so I'm going to run it instead. You know, I mean, that's just, coaches are supposed to be these grand strategists that are picking out plays, based on all these, and there's supposed to be this deep mental game going on between the two coaches. And right here, we have this crazy predictability about the coaches, right? This crazy, coaches have this tendency to not do the thing that went badly before, which is, it's bad. Anyway, and again, we can see all the way through here. So this is kind of giving you the EPA difference between a pass and a run. Passing is consistently better than running on second and down, all the way down to second and 1, where it kind of evens out. So yeah, next slide. Okay, here third down we see actually a complete reversal. Okay, third down it's like almost always better to run. Okay, by a huge amount. Okay, so and by pretty big values there. Those negative values meaning it's better to run on third down. And why is this? Probably because the defense is kind of expecting a pass on third down. In fact, defenses change substantially on third down. Coaches never talk about their first down versus their second down defense, but they always talk about their third down defense. They team sub in better pass rushers. They go to their nickel packages, which means you put more defensive backs, more small, speedy players on the field to defend against the pass better. So this is a possible explanation for why it's so much better to run on third down. So these numbers, they seem iffy, but why is this such a huge problem? It's the Nash equilibrium, right? Which Curtis talked about in his talk. If coaches were truly playing optimally, there should be no way to gain by switching strategies, right? By passing more or by running more on third down, right? It should be close, very much closer than this to 0. Okay. So let's do the next slide. Okay. And also this is just the fun, these are some fun statistics. Because, okay, Marshawn Lynch, he was the best offensive player for the Seahawks in 2013, right? So I know I showed you that on third down teams should run more, but of course, third down is a very small part of the game. First downs happen much more than third downs, and second downs happen more than third downs. I mean, you can't get to a third down without going through a first down and a second down first, so of course. Anyway, so it's interesting to see just overall, how much, a quarterback versus a running back, how is the EPA difference? It's insane, right? This was in 2013 when the Seahawks were led to the Super Bowl by Marshawn Lynch, right? Marshawn Lynch's EPA over the course of the entire season was 12 points. Russell Wilson's, the game manager, was 95 points, okay? His WPA was 1.97. That means he almost added a single win. Okay, Marshawn Lynch got a little lucky, and his WPA was 1. Okay, that's higher than it should be. Okay, but it still was less. It still is like just a little bit more than half of Russell Wilson's WPA. Okay. Okay, let's do the next one. Okay, another thing. Okay, so people are saying like, oh, okay, so running doesn't do as well as passing, but you gotta run to set up the pass. That's like a very classic thing. You gotta have a good running game if you want to have a good passing game. First of all, I mean, there are examples such as the 2003 or 2004 Raiders that completely contradict this. There are teams in history that have literally just given up, modern history, that have literally just given up the run almost completely and passed and had amazing offensive success. So there's issues there, but maybe it's kind of true. I mean, I would love to believe that it's true because it's this whole game theory aspect of football that is fun to watch. So Brian Burke looked at run EPA and pass EPA and saw if they were correlated for teams. They're poorly correlated, right? The correlation coefficient is 0.15, which is not great. Okay, I mean it's better than like the SAT's predictions of first year success, but it's still very bad. So Brian Burke invented a new statistic, success rate. Okay, because it's basically what does a running game really add to your team? It adds consistency, right? It doesn't add big gains like passing does, but it adds maybe consistency. It adds this like slow, just churning up yards down the field. Okay, so this new success rate, it just looks at whether or not for any given play, it just looks at whether or not EPA was positive or negative. Positive gets a 1, negative gets a 0. Okay, so it's just literally just the number of it's the total portion of plays that increased your probability, or that increased your expected points. That was basically successful, right? Run success rate and pass EPA are somewhat well correlated. Okay, 0.4, it's better than 0.15. It's still not amazing, but maybe there's so much noise in football that maybe it's hard to count. And run SR success rate also correlates more strongly with wins than run EPA. Okay, next slide. Okay, so has the NFL caught on though? I mean, still overall, even though we have this nice success rate statistic that gives us a better idea of how run is helping us out, it's not like teams should be running as much as they do. They should not. They should be passing less. To some degree, I mean, this is a common criticism of the NFL these days, is that it's becoming very pass-oriented. And that is what should be happening, okay? It is absolutely the correct things for teams to be doing, to pass more frequently, okay? They're still inefficient, they still run more than they should, but they are passing more, which is fantastic, okay? Next slide. Oh, okay. So I promised that I would talk about the worst play in history, and so of course the worst play. So WPA, of course, is what we're going to use because it allows us to factor in that leverage, right? To factor in how much did this really just alter this team's probability of winning. And of course, the worst play would have to be the play that reduces a team's chances the most of winning the Super Bowl, right? So it would have to be the play that had the largest WPA in the Super Bowl. And the winner is, anybody have any guesses? Yeah, it was the Patriots' Malcolm Butler interception of Russell Wilson, okay, in Super Bowl X-Licks. Before the play, the Seahawks had an 88% chance to win the game. That's pretty dang good. 88% chance, according to the win probability model. After the play, it was basically 0. I mean, the Seahawks did. I don't know how many of you remember this well, but it was very painful. You know, there were a lot of fights at the end of the game. The Seahawks really tried to, you know, get that 0 up to maybe a, 0.5, but they failed. So the play had a value of 0.88 WPA, which is almost as high as it can possibly be, right? The highest it could be on a single play would be 1, of course. Which, oh my God, can you imagine? What would I want? Anyway, okay, so for comparison, you've got, in Super Bowl, when the Seahawks had that undefeated season and David Tyree made that very famous helmet catch, that play was worth 0.22 WPA, which is a quarter of the devastation that we experienced. So anyway, next. Okay, wow, that's it. All right, so all the charts are from Advanced Football Analytics. You might notice, probably not, because it's very similar, and you probably weren't paying that much attention to the name of the site that I told you at the beginning. But you notice that it's a slightly different title than Advanced NFL Stats. He decided he wanted a slicker name, and so he decided to do a name change. But then he came up with that, and it still is pretty bad. So I don't know. Anyway, I also recommend. So that site is really good if you want to learn more about this stuff. I've barely scratched the surface of the research that Brian Burke and many of his collaborators now, because he started adding people later in the process, have done. And I also recommend Football Outsiders, which is, I disagree with them a lot more than I disagree with Advanced NFL Stats or Advanced Football Analytics, but they're still good. They have their place. And yeah, that's it. Or next, I think I got one more. Wait, right, the future. Wow, I put those slides out of order. Fantastic. Anyway, but that's fine. Football analytics is slowly gaining acceptance. Okay, I can't remember exactly when. But ESPN has started this statistic, which is bad. I mean, it's better than passer rating. I don't know how many of you know what passer rating is for rating quarterbacks, but it's this just awful statistic. I could do a whole talk on how bad it is. But they replaced it now, or not replaced it, but they're trying to replace it with this new statistic that is much better, and it takes into account expected points added, which is amazing, and WPA actually. Called Total QBR. Brian Burke, the guy I've been talking about, actually consulted ESPN when they were making this this new statistic. Fourth downs are still atrocious. Teams are not going for enough on fourth downs, even close. But one thing that was pretty encouraging, just recently, encouraging and sad in some ways, Advanced Football Analytics had to end because Brian Burke was hired as an analyst for ESPN. That's not a TV analyst. When you write it like that, it looks like he's going to be on TV. He will not be on TV. Okay. I listened to his podcast. They say he's got a face for radio. I would say Brian Burke has a voice for print. Recently, he's been using a new model that allows us to simulate football games called WOPR. I'm not sure exactly what that stands for, but it's very cool. It's very cool. It lets you say one really cool thing he did was I don't know, it was some team was up against the Jacksonville Jaguars, okay, and they were up by 14 or 21 points or something in the second half, and he said, okay, I want to simulate a bunch of games where I can't remember what team was playing against the Jaguars, but where the team playing against the Jaguars just kneels the ball every single time they have the ball, and see how often they win. And they won 70% of the time because it was the Jaguars. Football analytics. Oh, another thing that's worth noting is that football analytics has attracted attention from some academics because, admittedly, the statistics we talked about here are not very mathy. Okay, there's a lot of stuff going on here statistically that you could really pick apart. Okay. They're still way better than the stats that we had, but there's definitely some room for improvement just in the mathiness of these statistics. And so academics have been doing some more mathy stuff. You know, there was the founder of Freakonomics, Stephen Levitt, or the writer of Freakonomics, Stephen Levitt, he did a paper about football, running versus passing. And it was, you know, it was better statistically, but then Brian Burke had this huge long critique about how he was really he clearly hadn't watched enough games of football to understand, you know, that he was missing some key things in his analysis, just because he didn't have as good of an intuitive understanding of football as Brian Burke did. So anyway, that's just some of the things, and then one more, I think. Yeah, thanks, Wham. Okay.